The highlight of the Halo games, the Spartan super soldiers have capabilities and missions that are unmatched by any normal soldier, but their quick and lethal dagger-like strikes would be nothing without the massive ground troops assisting them in their missions, exploiting their breakthroughs, and holding the lines where the Spartans can't be. I'm Corporal Hot Pockets, and today we are having an in-depth view of UNSC infantry tactics and ground combat. All UNSC ground forces fall under UNICOM, Unified Ground Command, an interbranch command structure to efficiently manage all ground assets in a theater of battle and avoid inefficiencies of separate command structures and inter-service rivalries. This command includes all Army assets, the bulk of the UNSC ground combat strength, and the Navy's Marine Corps, which acts as a lighter, more versatile, and well-rounded force. The Marine Corps also includes one of the best special operations groups in the UNSC, the ODSTs, Orbital Drop Shock Troopers, which are used as either the first wave of a large-scale planetary assault or for smaller-scale, precise covert strikes behind enemy lines via their signature delivery method, orbital drop pods. Lastly, any additional security or special operations forces present of the Air Force or Navy also fall under UNICOM, with exception to the Spartans, who report to the Naval Special Warfare Group due to only jealously guarding their most valuable soldiers. Now to look at each one of these groups in depth. First off, the Marines. The Marine Corps is at its heart a flexible, adaptable, and lethal ground fighting force. Emphasis is placed on the infantry, with all other arms acting a supporting role. Armored vehicles reflect this, mostly being made up of Warthogs used for multiple roles such as troop transport, anti-aircraft, ground combat, and recon, and occasionally Scorpion tanks, which seem to be integrated into company and battalion-sized units in a large proportion. These Scorpions are mostly used in a supporting role to the infantry, similar to old infantry tanks of World War I and II. Other more specialized vehicles, such as artillery, APCs, heavy tanks, jamming, and anti-aircraft, are present, but far rarer and only seen in larger Marine units, which are very rare as most actions are done at the company and battalion levels, leaving mostly Warthogs and Scorpions. As for aviation, the Marine Corps has its own aircraft, but they are mostly limited to ground attack and air transportation, with space to atmosphere transit mostly being left to the Navy. The Navy complements the Marine Corps providing FTL transport and helps deploy to planet surfaces, and providing exo-atmospheric air support and critical services such as long-term supply, medical, and repair. As part of complementing each other, Navy ships will often carry Marine units on board if patrolling, although not if expecting an imminent naval battle. The Marines would be used for ship security, counterboarding, and deployment to planet surfaces as an emergency ground force. While most UNSC ships have the capacity to carry some Marine forces, there are dedicated assault carriers whose primary purpose is to carry and assist Marine ground operations. The most prominent of these was Spirit of Fire, a modified Phoenix-class colony ship which carried an ad hoc ground force similar to a Marine Expeditionary Brigade, having 6,000 Marines, 2,000 soldiers, and 1,000 ODSTs, and provided all necessary equipment and services for a long siege. Most often, Orion-class assault carriers fulfilled this role, carrying both thousands of UNSC troops, as well as all the ground equipment and supply sustainment facilities necessary. Lastly, the ODSTs are the main special forces group of the Marine Corps and one of the best in the UNSC. They are selected from veteran Marines and are either used in small numbers as special forces operators conducting sabotage, assassination of high-value targets, or gathering intelligence, or in large numbers, up to a battalion, used to spearhead large ground assaults by Marines. The former are known as recon ODSTs and are heavily recruited by ONI to assist our field agents, as they are some of the best unaugmented soldiers in the UNSC. Next is the Army, which is the larger but also less talked about branch of the UNSC. The Army is a larger and more diverse force, on paper complementing the Marine Corps by being the shaft of the spear, providing the numbers, firepower, and long-term logistical, engineering, and medical support that the Marines do not have. The Marine Corps would be used as the assault element, primarily grabbing land, with the Army being the defensive element, primarily garrisoning it. Due to this, the Army's operations are primarily defensive, and they also operate on larger unit scales, such as brigades and divisions, compared to the Marines acting mostly as battalions and companies. This not only allows them to have all arms of combat available, but also to have more specialized military vehicles without the restrictions of needing to be transported by starships and dropped by albatrosses and pelicans. On top of regular ground troops, the Army also maintains an Air Corps composed mostly of light ground attack and transportation helicopters, as well as a wet water Navy which has automated drone fighters and aircraft carriers, as well as several different special forces groups that are mostly used for behind enemy lines independent operations. Additionally, the Army works in close cooperation with the Air Force as UNSC's main defensive branches, with the Air Force complementing the Army's Air Corps with surface-to-space transport, short sword in-atmosphere bombers, and long sword exo-atmospheric fighter bombers for both defending against enemy fighters and attacking enemy capital ships in space. Air Force bases also tend to have large and well-managed security forces which assist in ground combat and defense, supplementing Army troops. In practice, however, Covenant forces are often able to overwhelm orbital defenses quickly and land sizable numbers of ground troops before an effective planet-wide response can be mustered, worsened by strikes on major established bases and command nodes, leaving ground defenders to fight as isolated pockets and be destroyed piecemeal, or by glassing once Covenant ground objectives have been met. Without any FDL presence and direct air support, any stationed ground troops are at risk to being glassed by Covenant ships, while still being on ground without any hope of fighting back. Because of this, it is always extremely risky to have ground troops stationed in the direct path of a Covenant assault, and why Marines deployed for ships have always been the troops with the highest chance of survival. Because of this, there have only been a handful of scenarios where the Army's doctrine of holding land has been effective because of the Covenant's unwillingness to glass planets, such as Jericho 7 and other such planets that could not be glassed because of their foreigner significance. And even these planets were eventually overwhelmed due to the lack of naval and air support, with the ground troops being slowly whittled down until the Covenant was able to retrieve its specific objectives and then glass the rest of the planet once it was no longer important to save it. This difference between the Army and Marine Corps' methods of fighting illustrate the factors of land combat in the 26th century. The balance of firepower is so dramatically shifted towards space that ground warfare is almost entirely subject to its whim. However, this does not make the Army or Air Force redundant. As previously mentioned, there have been circumstances in which overwhelming naval firepower could not be used by the Covenant. However, smaller tactical strikes could still be used against priority targets, making conditions for ground troops still very difficult. In other specific cases, UNSC Air Force garrisons were able to slow down Covenant's assaults, such as in Meridian, which turned what was supposed to be a fast raid into a 3-year siege, buying time for the UNSC. And ultimately, with the end of the war, there came a technological revolution involving the introduction of energy shields, high-powered weapons, shrinking FTL drives with much higher speed and precision, and instant comms. These were tools used by the Covenant to great effect in the war, without the spark of human creativity, which appeared afterwards. Even in the earliest years post-war, these technologies began implementation in the UNSC, from FDL-capable dropships to new high-powered tank guns, and even the UNSC Infinity, a massive lifeboat-turned supercarrier thanks to the implementation of Covenant and Foreigner technologies introduced post-war, making it the most powerful warship in that period. And with humanity losing hundreds of outer colonies, which provided a disproportionate amount of food and raw resources, the UNSC may have to look at invading and occupying former Covenant worlds with populations in the billions in order to maintain its future. Officers at the highest echelons of ONI have discussed the possibilities of recolonizing St. Helios after wiping out the native population with an artificial famine, with similar possibilities also existing for the Brood homeworld and the other thousands of planets in Covenant-controlled space. Thus, while the UNSC Army and Air Force may have looked redundant in the wartime years due to their limitations and dangers, the changes in the nature of ground combat have revitalized their abilities and their purpose, making them an instrumental tool in humanity's future. Thank you for watching my video. If you want more content on Halo's militaries, organizations, technologies, tactics, and battles, stay tuned. Also, if you want to actively partake in these discussions, join my Discord server, where we have a lot of military nuts there, not just for Halo, other sci-fis, and real world. We have a lot of fun, and we try to be as active as possible.